Hello all you freedom-loving people. Welcome to another episode of Front Page International. I'm your host, Scott Cameron Goulet. Just 2 months after the Taliban took control of Afghanistan, 22.8 million Afghans are facing severe food security problems. In a surprise change of tone, the WTO criticized the CCP for its unfair trade practices and not fulfilling its obligations. Everyone knows that the CCP never keeps its promises, so why is the CCP still a major player in the world economic stage? Tennis superstar Novak Djokovic is making headlines for refusing to disclose his vaccination status to the Australian Open. Authorities say that foreign players must be fully vaccinated to enter Australia, but could the tennis organization afford not to allow the world #1 player in? While many countries around the world are implementing stricter vaccine passport requirements, Sweden has extended its pause on Moderna vaccines for people under 30 due to heart-related side effects. Okay, let's get into it. United Nations agencies warned Monday that humanitarian needs in Afghanistan have grown to unprecedented levels. More than half of the conflict-torn country's population, a record 22.8 million people, will face acute food insecurity starting in November. The Food and Agriculture Organization and World Food Program, the WFP, said in a joint study that the effects of drought, conflict, and economic decline have severely affected the lives, circumstances, and Afghans' food supply. The study reads, among those at risk are 3.2 million children under the age of 5 who are expected to suffer from acute malnutrition by the end of the year. The latest UN information comes as an imminent winter threatens to isolate areas of Afghanistan from the humanitarian aid that the families need to survive the frigid winter. David Beasley, the WFP executive director, said Afghanistan is now among the world's worst humanitarian crises, if not the worst, and food security has all but collapsed. He went on to say that Afghans will have to choose between moving and starving unless assistance can be ramped up and the economy revived. He added, we are on a countdown to collapse, and if we don't act now, we will have a total disaster on our hands. The Taliban took control of Afghanistan in August after overthrowing the Western-backed government. The militants' return to power has visited financial sanctions on Kabul by the United States and other Western nations. It blocked the Taliban's access to around $10 billion in Afghan assets, most of which is held by the U.S. Federal Reserve. Washington and European countries have declined to work directly with the Taliban or recognize its interim government, but they have promised to deliver the much-needed humanitarian aid to Afghans. The UN said it will need to deploy resources at unprecedented levels to meet the scale of need, complaining its humanitarian response plan is a third funded. Aid agencies warned that current drought conditions will likely extend into 2022. Friction between Turkey and 10 Western countries, including the U.S., have eased days after the Turkish president threatened to ban their ambassadors, though the underlying causes remain. The dispute flared when the embassies of the U.S., Germany, Canada, Denmark, Finland, France, the Netherlands, New Zealand, Norway, and Sweden issued an unusual statement calling for the release of jailed philanthropist Osman Kavala. This angered Turkish President Erdogan, and he ordered the envoys to be expelled. Then the country said on Monday that they would not interfere in Turkey's affairs. Erdogan said at a news conference that the 10 countries had stepped back and would be more careful. Even though he was quite unyielding, Erdogan's comments on Monday were a marked change to deflate tensions after his threats. The 64-year-old Kavala is one of Turkey's most prominent civil society supporters and Erdogan critic. He is accused of trying to overthrow Erdogan by funding the 2016 coup attempt and the 2013 civil unrest. He's been in jail for 4 years, but he has not been convicted of anything and proclaims his innocence. He said his case is an example of a widespread crackdown on dissent. The Council of Europe, Europe's main human rights watchdog, reiterated its final warning to Turkey. It must free Kavala pending trial. The Turkish president claims he is defending Turkey's independence, but some say he is playing to his voting base with presidential elections coming up in 2023. Erdogan could be using tough diplomacy to redirect public attention from a plummeting currency and looming economic crisis. He may claim that his opposition is cooperating with foreign powers and the CIA in Washington to oust him. On October 24th, the United States urged North Korea to stop any and all missile tests and resume nuclear talks, just days after the North fired its first underwater launched ballistic missile in 2 years. After meeting with South Korean officials to discuss the test, the U.S. envoy on North Korea, Sung Kim, said that nuclear negotiations between Washington and Pyongyang are stalled. North Korea fired a newly developed ballistic missile from a submarine on October 19th. It is difficult to detect missiles fired from submarines, so this new weapon would give North Korea time to fire a secondary retaliatory attack. South Korean officials said the missile appeared to only be in its early stages of development. This was the North's most high-profile test firing since Joe Biden took office. The 2019 talks between President Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un have been suspended since the U.S.-led sanctions on North Korea. The Biden administration has repeatedly offered to meet North Korea anywhere at any time without preconditions, but the Hermit Kingdom said that a return to talks is conditioned on the United States ending the sanctions and regular military drills with South Korea. Before the submarine missile launched, North Korea had also tested several other new weapon systems over a 6-week period, including its longest-range cruise missile and a hypersonic missile that is currently in development. The North could potentially strike the U.S. allies South Korea and Japan. Some experts said that North Korea could test a missile that could reach American soil in order to maximize pressure on the United States. The World Trade Organization, the WTO, held a review meeting on the Chinese Communist Party's trade policy on Wednesday, October 20th. WTO reviews are routine, mandated in the organization's agreement. For the biggest countries such as China, this happens every 2 years. The tone for this year's meeting was markedly sharper than in the CCP's last review in 2018. Prior to the review, the CCP had received more than 1,600 questions from 40 member states. The United States, European Union, Japan, Britain, Australia, Canada, and India all criticized China's trade actions. This December marks 20 years since the CCP joined the WTO, but critics say the country's market reforms have been inadequate. David Bisbee, United States mission to the WTO, released a statement on the CCP's trade policy review last Wednesday. Bisbee said that during the review in 2018, the U.S. issued an opening statement that was frank and direct about the importance of China in the international trading system, as well as the unique and fundamental challenges that the CCP poses to the WTO system. However, today, those challenges remain before us. When China joined, the members expected that the provisions that are set forth in the CCP's Protocol of Ascension would permanently nullify its existing policies and practices. These policies and practices are incompatible with an international trading system based on open market-oriented policies, but these expectations have not been met, and the CCP does not seem inclined to change. Instead, it has doubled down on its state-led non-market approach to trade, to the detriment of workers and businesses in the United States and other countries. He said, the most fundamental U.S. concern about the CCP trade is its industrial policy. Bisbee said, China's industrial policies skew the playing field against imported goods and services and foreign manufacturers and service providers through an array of supporting measures. These measures include market access limitation, investment restrictions, and massive subsidies that lead to severe and persistent excess capacity. He said, other unfair trade practices include preferential treatment of state-owned enterprises and other beneficiary Chinese companies, and ineffective enforcement of intellectual property rights, and cyber theft. China's use of these measures to ensure its dominance in the global marketplace has harmed U.S. economic interests. The United States was far from alone in complaining about the CCP's failure to live up to its obligations. Representatives from various governments around the globe cataloged a long list in which they said the CCP bends or breaks the rules. Britain, Canada, the European Union, Australia, and Japan have also called for reforms to make the world's second largest economy freer and more open. Knowing now the behavior that Communist China has exhibited, with the really significant failure to live up to their commitments, many people ask the question, should China have been admitted to the WTO? The answer would be no, said Stefan Ezel, Vice President of Global Innovation Policy at the Washington-based Information Technology and Innovation Foundation. He said that the CCP has engaged in decades of gaming the global trading system. In a recent report, Ezel details how the communist regime remains woefully short of meeting the commitments it made as conditions of being a part of the WTO in December of 2001. A decades-long U.S. policy towards the CCP was based on the belief that through engagement in economic development, it would evolve from a totalitarian regime toward a more democratic country. This strategy of appeasement resulted in trillions of dollars and hundreds of thousands of U.S. jobs lost to China. Instead of becoming more democratic, the CCP used this wealth to advance its dictatorship, creating the most technologically advanced tyranny in the world. Now, indeed, it is becoming increasingly clear that the CCP is causing serious damage to other WTO members and the multilateral trading system. The WTO system was not designed to account for the emergence of a non-market economy as large as China. Last month, U.S. and European trade representatives met. They agreed to strengthen bilateral and multilateral cooperation on trade and technology and reform the WTO to meet the CCP challenge. However, experts said that it was unlikely to prompt any significant change in the CCP policies. That is, in large part because all major policy changes are made by consensus, so reining in the CCP will be difficult or even impossible to implement. Gary Huffbauer, a senior fellow at the Peterson Institute for International Economics, pointed out that a serious commitment to pursue change in the CCP would have to be driven by the United States. In his opinion, the Biden administration is not inclined to engage in deep WTO negotiations at this time. Before we move on to how the world's #1 tennis player is defying the vaccine mandate and why Sweden is extending its pause on the Moderna vaccine, I want to take a moment to ask you to please help us spread the word about this show. Every like, comment, and share helps more people to see the truth. And if you're new to the channel, please subscribe. And if you would like to further help Front Page, please consider supporting us by donating to our donor box. The link is in the description. We here at Front Page thank you for your support. Okay, let's get back into it. The world's #1 tennis player, Novak Djokovic, has remained tight-lipped on whether or not he has been vaccinated. This has caused widespread speculation on whether or not he would be allowed to play at the Australian Open. Victorian State Premier Daniel Andrews previously suggested unvaccinated players would be denied entry into Australia, but a leaked email from tennis authorities plans to give unvaccinated players an exemption to head to Melbourne. However, they will face 2 weeks of hotel quarantine upon arrival and be subjected to regular COVID tests. For the fully vaccinated, though, they will have complete freedom of movement, provided they test negative before and after arrival in Australia. New York Times reporter Ben Rothenberg, who shared the email, said, "Tennis Australia has asked us to wait a few days before speaking about it, as they were still working with the government on the details." So it seems like Djokovic will be able to defend his Grand Slam title even though he may be unvaccinated. The tennis superstar has been the center of a COVID storm. He's been seen at parties and nightclubs with other players with no masks or social distancing. In an interview, he refused to reveal whether he'd been fully vaccinated or not, saying it is a private matter and an inappropriate inquiry. He is not the only tennis player who has declined to reveal their vaccination status. Stefanos Tsitsipas is another high-profile tennis player opposed to being jabbed. The world #3 said he has concerns about the vaccine and would only get it if it becomes mandatory to tour. The #2 ranked Daniel Medvedev has backed his friend and rival Djokovic over his views and said He has also decided not to disclose medical things, but wants to play in Australia. Widespread vaccine mandates imposed by the government have not only caused disputes about individual freedom and constitutional rights, but it also is creating significant economic challenges. Some argue that the vaccine mandate is driving people out of the workforce rather than encouraging them to come back in. This trend is especially concerning as our frontline health workers and first responders are resigning or being fired. Workers that worked all through the pandemic are threatening to quit after feeling their constitutional rights are being violated. The number may seem small, as many employees do get vaccinated, but they're big enough to disrupt the labor industry. This will further exacerbate the already stressed out supply chain. Author of the new Great Depression, Winners and Losers in the Post-Pandemic World, Jim Rickards warns that vaccine mandates are creating a two-tier society in which the unvaccinated are systemically ostracized. Sweden continues to hold back the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine for people aged 30 and younger because of heart-related side effects. Finland's National Health Authority, THL, also announced Thursday that it would pause the use of Moderna's vaccine in young men. All males aged 30 or younger would be offered the Pfizer vaccine. Instead, the European Medicines Agency approved the use of the Moderna shot for children 13 and older in July, marking the first time that the vaccine had been authorized for use in people under 18. But on October 6th, the Public Health Agency of Sweden said it was pausing the use of Moderna for the 30 or younger age group after data showed that an increase of risk of inflammation of the heart muscle or the sac surrounding the heart. The initial pause had a deadline of December 1st. In the new announcement, the agency said that it was extending the halt beyond the original deadline. Anyone under 30 who has already received a first dose of Moderna would take a Pfizer shot as a second dose instead. Currently, around 85% of all Swedes aged 16 and older have received one dose of the COVID-19 vaccine, while 80% have had 2 shots or more. Meanwhile, a World Health Organization, WHO, advisory group is studying decisions in both Sweden and Denmark to halt vaccinating young people with the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine amid health concerns. Denmark announced earlier this month that it would stop offering the Moderna vaccine to anyone under 18 as a precaution due to data indicating heart-related side effects, the Danish health authority said. In the preliminary data, there is a suspicion that an increased risk of heart inflammation when vaccinated with Moderna. The WHO's Assistant Director General said on Thursday that the result of those studies are expected soon. Let's end today's show with a lighthearted story full of creativity. A young artist in Tokyo, Japan has carved out her own unique career by teaching herself cardboard art and recycling old cardboard boxes into praiseworthy sculptures. Manomi Ono, a 29-year-old graduate of Osaka University of Arts, has a passion for movies, TV shows, and anime. In the summer of 2011, she got hooked on making cardboard sculptures and has since adopted Cardboard Girl as her nickname. She usually creates works based on her favorite themes. To date, Ono has completed about 200 such sculptures in a variety of styles, ranging from movie characters to vehicles, guns, robots, and food and drink. Each of the pieces is vivid and the detail is breathtaking. She even makes shoes, clothes, and equipment from cardboard. Halloween is only a few days away, so if you are still racking your brain for your child or grandchild's Halloween costume, these may bring you some inspiration. Ono told the Epoch Times, "I am very sympathetic to the weakness of cardboard. It mostly is used to wrap and protect other things that are more valuable, and it gets disposed of after only one use. So when creating artwork, she takes that into account and fully demonstrates the characteristics of cardboard. In order to preserve the original color, corrugation, and surface texture, Ono only uses scissors, a paper cutter, ruler, glue, and paper tape during the creation process. A crude production of a 10 cubic centimeter sculpture can take 10 days to complete. A precise sculpture of 60 cubic centimeter sculpture can take up to 3 months. As time passes, her work becomes more and more delicate. Ono says that she challenges herself each time to see how much more she can make and how much higher she can reach. She said, "Accepting challenges makes one grow." Okay, this is our show for today. If you want more Front Page, please join our membership site where we have in-depth reports and sensitive news that you cannot see on YouTube. And if you like what you heard, please don't forget to like and subscribe this video and share it with your friends and family, because everybody deserves to know the truth. Again, thank you for watching Front Page International, and we will see you next time.